And Jeff, welcome back to BYU.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you here today. And as Anda said, I work in Instructures, so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, all right, I got to make sure I don't ask a wrong question or do anything out of line, or I may be fired.
Or you might come try to pick my pocket later today or something after that story.
That's good tips, Anda. Yeah, thank you. No, it really is an honor having you here with us, and it's a pleasure for me to work under your leadership at Instructures. So, as is typical, we like to get to know you a little bit personally. I know we're going to really start to geek out over some HR awesomeness in this interview today, but maybe we'll just start off with some rapid-fire questions, and feel free to elaborate as we go through these. But where were you born?
So I was born here in Salt Lake, originally from Salt Lake.
And did you grow up here then?
And I grew up in Sandy. My only claim to fame about where I grew up is I lived next door to Larry Miller. This was before he became a gazillionaire, so this was early on. And I caused a lot of trouble with his other son, Greg, so we grew up together.
Oh, that's great. And what's your father's name?
So my father's name is Eldon.
Eldon. And what was his profession?
So he built a lumber yard and a trucking company, and I think it's relevant. So he built a company that grew fairly rapidly during a construction boom in the early and late 70s, and then the market crashed and he lost the business. And so I grew up in the experience of having pretty much anything, and then all of a sudden we had nothing as a family. And so then he tried to start another business and hired me because he couldn't afford to hire normal employees, so I was one of the few employees that actually could speak English. So he gave me all these jobs to do all the time. And I guess he was used to bossing a lot of other people around, so he would boss me around, give me all these experiences to go do things like driving delivery trucks and doing all these other things.
Wow.
So it was a good experience in the sense that it was very painful as an experience for me growing up.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to solve problems myself. I had to learn to take initiative, do things I wouldn't normally be expected to do as a 15 or 16-year-old.
Oh, that's
so I
great.
think that was helpful.
Yeah.
So that was his profession, but also turned into my experience that I think probably had a big impact on how I turned out today.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And what's your mother's name?
Allison.
And what was her profession?
So she works as an admin here at the church, actually.
Okay. Great. Very good. So tell me, what's the greatest lesson you learned from your father?
I think I probably just shared that in the sense that he gave me the opportunity to learn in an environment that was challenging and expected a lot from me, and sometimes just left it up to me to solve problems myself. And I think that's something that I learned from him, is that you just can't expect other people to do things for you. You kind of have to figure it out and make it happen.
And what about for your mother? What lesson did you learn from her?
I think she loves everyone no matter what they do in life. So we have a very open, friendly family. People can come to family gatherings and feel like part of the family, and she makes them feel welcome no matter what the situation. So that's what I learned from her.
I can see those traits in you. That's great to see that.
Thanksgiving dinner, you don't know who's going to show up. You're going to have a lot of people there, and it'll be great. So that's kind of what it is.
So if you weren't leading HR, what other profession might you like to do?
You know, I enjoyed doing consulting for a while, working with companies. I feel like if you can help leverage the capabilities people and companies have and increase their path to success, for me that's valuable and rewarding and feeling like I can make a difference.
Is there a profession you would not like to do?
Well, I don't know, but one time on Trek, I had to be in charge of the porta potties. And I will tell you, that's a job I don't want to ever do again. Just saying. Let's avoid that one. If there's a job I want to avoid, it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enough said, huh?
Enough said.
Well, let's get into some HR questions. We have take our HR classes here through our MBA program, and something that's interesting to us as leaders. I would ask you, how can we as leaders better leverage talent?
That's a great question. If it's okay, I'd like to draw a quick diagram because I think it's a framework for a lot of things around talent. So there's kind of three categories around talent that I like to think about. First of all, you have talent acquisition. Then you have talent engagement. And this is everything you do to not only retain employees, you know, it might used to be called talent retention, but it's really about engaging employees and creating an experience for employees that's meaningful and long-lasting, and where employees want to give back value to the organization. And then the other category I would call talent development or growth. And I think everything you do around leveraging talent in an organization belongs in one of these three categories. You can probably talk a lot about those. And then, you know, we'll talk more about some other questions, I think, but you have to have a culture or an environment that supports and is aligned with the talent you have in your organization, and that has to align to your strategy or mission. So I promise I won't do any more whiteboarding other than this, but this is a framework I think that if you think about this correctly, you can really leverage the capabilities and talent in an organization to make your company more successful. And so you have to have effective strategies in each of these categories, which both align with your culture and support your strategy or your mission. If you don't have those aligned, you won't be successful as a company long term.
Can you tell me about this framework? Is this something that you've developed over the years? Is this kind of best practices in the industry?
I think it might be a combination of things I've seen in leadership development classes and workshops. I know there's some methodologies around talent acquisition and talent management from other companies, but this is now I've kind of developed this framework and thinking about it myself and how we want organizations to be successful around leveraging the capability they have in their company.
And is this something that's evolving at all, or this is set, but how do you build off and work off of this framework?
I think it's always evolving. Each of those components, you see evolution. How do people engage and retain employees today? It's a lot different than when I started my career almost 100 years ago, I think, in the oil industry, right? Where it was very prescriptive and top-down leadership and very directive about how people do things. It was a union-based environment, and so there was a lot of difference there then than I'm experiencing now in the technology sector and how we manage people today.
Okay. Along those lines, what are the trends? How is performance management changing?
Yeah, so I think many of you work in companies, I'm sure, or leaders in companies where the view around performance management is changing. The traditional performance review process is going away at most companies and will eventually evolve from where it is today. That's very traditional. It's been around a long time and basically has resulted in a one-time-a-year conversation with an employee manager about their performance. That's not real time, that's not relevant, that's not helpful. And usually related to some kind of rating process that happened as well. In my experience over the years, I found that a manager would come to me and want to fire an employee, and I said, okay, well, have you had discussions around their performance? No, but I gave them a really good rating last time, but now they've kind of gone downhill. Or the reverse of that, someone wants to be promoted and they gave them a really bad rating last time. So there wasn't always a strong correlation in those conversations. And what I found is, and what I think companies are finding today, is that performance is real time. You should be having regular, ongoing, constant communication with people about performance. And the role as a manager has also changed and evolved too. Managers should be a mentor and a coach. Their goal should be to help other people be successful. And that's how I judge an effective manager, if their employees that they help manage or coach and develop are successful, right? That's how you evaluate a strong leader, is they make other people become more successful around them and give them the resources, tools, coaching, mentoring, whatever else they need to do that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I came from a Fortune 500 company before Instructure, and I was used to not a lot of layers of management because there had been some cutbacks. I remember asking you actually early on, like, why do we only have a few direct reports for each manager? And you spoke to that you really you invest in that framework, invest in those managers to really coach and develop the employees.
Yeah, we don't have a high level of hierarchy, but we have very few direct reports to every manager because their role is to make other people become more successful.
Right. Well, that's great. How has technology and online learning affected this framework for you?
I think that's a great point. So you have to leverage technology, especially this environment. And what I found is, you think about your experience as consumers, when you want information, you can get it, right? And not only do you get information you're looking for, you always get suggestions from tools you use online that tell you what else you should be looking for that may be interesting to you based on your previous preferences. How come that doesn't work in the workplace? How come we don't have those kinds of tools in the workplace? So we have to develop tools or utilize tools, online apps and other applications that help us give employees information that they need when they need it that's relevant for their job. And I call this the path to productivity. If we can increase this path to productivity faster, all of us will be more successful. Because ultimately, information that we all have as employees is power. And if we want to be successful and leverage our talents in the organization, we have to have access to information when we need it, real time, and it's accessible. And so as you think about tools we use, we have lots of different applications we use, and then some we built, as you know, at our company. So there's tools out there that are more OKR oriented. So we use a tool called BetterWorks, which is objectives and key results. And instead of having traditional performance review processes, employees all enter their goals. They're aligned in the company. You can see everyone else's goals in the company. I can click on Kurt's goals and see how he's progressing. He can click on mine, and we can see what's going on. It's very transparent, very open, and we hold each other accountable. It's more social and collaborative. And that's how performance should be, is we work together as a team to succeed, which I think is more productive than not. And then there's other tools, for example, online recognition tools, where each employee in the company gets a budget every month that they can allocate and give to other people using an online application and thank them. And as they do that, it's connected to the values we have in the company. So every time you give recognition, you have to indicate which value it's attributed to. So we can reinforce the things we want people living by in the company. And everyone gets a budget to do that, not just managers. And so it's a different way of using tools to increase recognition and collaboration in the company. So there's a lot of different options to do that. The tool we've created, as you know, Kurt knows this, because we've created this online learning management platform called Bridge, which is really a more collaborative, innovative, easier to use learning management platform for employees. We found that, in my experience and other experiences, learning in companies hasn't been as adaptive or innovative as learning in schools or learning institutions. And so we've taken what we've learned in Canvas, which we've provided to higher ed institutions for many years now, and applied it to the corporate learning management setting, and made it easier for employees to access. It's relevant, it's useful, there's bite-sized segments you can pull up when you need something, and it's always there instead of trying to log on and find your way into it and take a 2-hour-long course that doesn't really help you with what you need today. So the focus is making it more relevant, and we learn from each other in the process. That was a ramble. Sorry, just to give you more context.
Oh, that was great. Please ramble on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What was the name of the program you used to share goals back and forth?
It's called BetterWorks.
BetterWorks?
BetterWorks is one of them. There's a few others out there in case you want to investigate. 7 Geese. I know it's a great name, right? Like, who would come up with that for a goals management software? Another one's called Reflective with a K. So those are 3 that you may want to investigate as far as leveraging employee goals and opportunities for performance instead of a traditional performance review process.
How often do they place the goals?
As frequently as needed. They should be real time. They may get updated every 2 weeks, or they may get updated every quarter. It's whenever they just keep them current. They can close them out and add new ones or adjust anytime. They're all real.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. As we're thinking and talking about these tools that are in place at Instructure, it makes me think about the culture that's there, which I really appreciate, the culture at Instructure. And can you speak to your philosophy on culture and then how it plays in with this framework?
Yeah, we have a really mature culture at Instructure. Our culture is definitely one that's open and transparent. You know, Zonda joked about this a little bit. I moved from an office environment to a no office environment. So Kurt and I, we sit at desks. No cubicles, just flat out desks everywhere. So our CEO, all the executives, we sit at desks with our teams. Our CEO moves around a lot. So it's meant to exhibit the trait we want to create in the organization of transparency and openness. We share financial information with every employee. Again, going back to the information is power, that everyone should act like an owner in the business and have that information available for them. And you know, we spend, as you know, company meetings going through the financials and talking about how the company's doing, what's going well and what's not. And Josh, our CEO, does a great job of establishing that culture and communicating the expectation that here's the information, we expect you to use this to make good decisions and don't do something stupid. I mentioned our, kind of a little bit immature culture, it's a little anti-corporate. So our values, the moniker is cooties, right? That's what we use to remember our values. So that's how mature we are. But it creates a great environment where I think people are open. They're willing to share information, not hide information, because everything's open, like our goals and our performance as a company. Everyone can be held more accountable for their results because they're visible. And people can't really hide. Bad performers don't stick around because they either get chased out by other people on their team or someone makes a decision that's not working out. So it's more accountability, I guess, when you have more visibility.
Absolutely. Can you think about an individual or maybe a situation where you saw that culture have an impact on somebody? Maybe they were not used to that type of culture we have at Instructure, or...
Well, I think it works both ways. We have hired people who fit really well with that culture, right? Who love it, who thrive, and even if they've come from a different environment, that suits them well to be transparent and open, and they can be highly successful there. And we've promoted a lot of people from within. We track actual internal promotions, and even though we're growing fairly rapidly, we don't always just hire people from the outside. I mentioned earlier today we've hired roughly 25 to 30% of our internal hires are internal promotions. And that gives people a chance to succeed in that environment because they can, and that's important. On the other hand, we've hired some people from big companies that we just can't kick the Oracle out of them. Sorry if anyone works for Oracle, but they come from an environment that's very structured and very different from what we operate in, and sometimes that's not a good culture fit. And so one of the challenges we have as a company, and you as leaders will have, is how do you assess and hire people that will fit in the dynamic and the culture you have? Not that one culture is good or bad, it's just different. And how do you assess not only capabilities and competencies when you hire people, going back to the talent acquisition process, but how do you hire people that fit your culture and your dynamic in your environment that will succeed there? And I think that's an important part of the acquisition process and assessing culture as well as talent capability.
Can you speak more to that? How do you tell if someone's going to fit the culture as you're going through that hiring process?
Yeah, so that actually is a real challenge. It's a challenge for us today. We did a case study on this because we wanted some of our focus groups to help come up with some ideas. You know, we do a lot of video interviewing, we do some case studies, we do some assessments, and then we do a lot of on-site interviewing because people need to be there and see it. We had an employee start with us who had worked from home as an engineer for most of their career and come into that environment with open desk and noise and collaboration happening, and they didn't stick around. And so we have to be honest that it's not for everybody. And so we're very transparent about here's what the expectation is, here's the culture, we take them to a few meetings, show them how it actually works. And if they're uncomfortable with that, we know it right up front. And we want to be very transparent about what the expectation is versus what their experience has been in the past.
Yeah, thank you. So we talked in our HR core class last year about the importance of HR having a seat at the executive's table. And you've had that privilege, and you've been able to get to the executive table. So I would ask you, how do you get there? And then once you're there, how do you utilize that power and influence?
Yeah. So I like to think of HR as a business profession, not as a support function. And one thing going back to why you're all here is the MBA program, I think, was very instrumental in that. I wanted to learn business so I could be successful in my role as an HR professional. And you have to understand, in my opinion, the business as well as any of the business owners, any of the general managers or any of the functional owners. You have to be in conversations with them and speak the business as well as they can, which means you have to make extra effort since you're not always running that business, to know the business, to know the product, to know the customers, to know what they're looking for, to talk about the engineering cycle process, know what kind of skill set we're hiring for as a company. And when you're around the table with the executive team talking about a business strategy proposition or what we call bets as far as our investments and what we're going to invest in, they'll expect contributions from you just like anyone else at the table. And if you don't provide that, your credibility will diminish. And so you have to own up for that. You have to work extra hard and learn the business. And then you have to weigh in on the business, not just on people-related issues, but on business questions and issues as well.
Right. Well, that's great. So we're learning that sometimes there's just little things that people do differently that can have a big impact. Can you tell us maybe about some of the traits that you think that have been key for your success?
So I think any manager, to be successful, has to be very clear about the expectations they set for people they work with, both people they manage and people that manage them and people they partner and work with. Clarifying expectations and delivering or over-delivering on those expectations. For me, I found what helped me most with success in my career, I can find that if I can make someone else more successful than they would otherwise be, that helps everyone become more successful, including myself. And so I want to be the person people come to when they have a problem and can't solve it. If I can help them address a challenge they're facing in their business, if we can facilitate other people to become more successful, we will be more successful. Some people don't have that mentality. I think it works against them over the long term.
Okay. How has your education, which was at BYU, right? How has that impacted your career?
I think dramatically. I think both undergrad, I did a business/HR undergrad at BYU, and then I did the MBA with an emphasis in organizational behavior. And for me, those business classes in all functions helped me get that breadth of experience I think was valuable both in consulting and working with many startups in the technology sector and speaking the business language with them, and then also in my roles in the HR function as well, which I don't like calling it the HR function. That's why I use the people title. The HR function title brings with it some old school mentality, and I want to move away from that and have people think about it differently. We're really about creating a people experience, and that's what it's about. We talk a lot about creating a customer experience, and I like to translate that to we also have to create an experience for our employees because they're the ones that actually create that customer experience. And if we don't have that mentality, how does that get passed along to your customers? And that's really important for us.
Absolutely. Now, you are a trailblazer, I believe, in this, not HR, but this people area. So can you tell us about some of the things that you're doing that would be considered on the kind of cutting edge?
Yeah, for me, I like to think about it, as we've talked about, how do you create that people experience that leverages the talent within your organization to make them more productive, happy, engaged? Someone who's engaged creates much more value than someone who's not. Someone's just punching a clock, just doing the work they're expected to do with no real meaning behind it, doesn't get you anywhere. So I think you have to do a really good job of clarifying both your strategy and your mission. Why do you do what you do, and how does that job connect to that mission? And if people don't make that connection, their level of engagement never rises above the satisfied. So I think you have to make that connection first. Everything else around compensation and benefits and the environment, those all contribute to that, and they can detract from that, but they should support that rather than just be the factor people focus on. My experience has been if someone comes to you and asks for more money, it isn't always because of the money. It's usually because some other factor that goes into their excitement or engagement about work is missing and needs to be addressed.
Can you think about a time that you were trying to innovate maybe in this area and you failed?
I've probably had several of those. Try to forget those. Why do you keep bringing those up? Yeah, we don't want to talk about failures. So I think there's been several times, and sometimes you have to be careful not to push too fast because change is difficult for all of us, and we're not comfortable with change. And when we push things too fast, people have to understand why it's good for them. If they don't understand why it's good for them, they'll resist. And you have to get over that hurdle. And so, for example, let's go back to that performance review process. We used to have a more traditional performance review process with a rating end-of-year review cycle. And when we blew that up and got rid of it, I might have been moving a little too fast for people to accept that because, hold it, I don't get to give ratings to my employees anymore. Where did those go? What do I do? How do I decide things? And so we had to help people understand you still know if people are performing well or not. You give them feedback on their goals and their performance, and you should talk to people about how they're doing, but it's different now. And helping people go through that change sometimes is more dramatic than we realize. I think it's a great idea, and I want to go forward with it, and everyone else seems to think it's a good idea, but it's in the implementation and help people understand the why before you go forward with the change is sometimes more helpful.
Yeah. Many people in this MBA program are right now recruiting or maybe in a position at some point in the future where they're recruiting. What tips or advice would you have around recruitment?
So I think it goes back to the basics. You have to have very clear understanding what you're looking for. I know I run a team of a lot of recruiters. We hire a lot of people. I think we hired 350 people last year, and we have to hire 350 more this year. I will tell you the thing that helps everyone the most is to clarify expectations on the position. It's amazing how many times we change our minds as hiring managers about what we're looking for, and you think about the cycle that causes as far as the types of candidates the recruiters are trying to help hire. So as leaders in the organization, your recruiters will be much more successful if you're very clear about not only the job expectations, but the competencies and skills you're looking for to set up for success. And then give calibration feedback on a regular, quick basis to people as they go through that process. And then work with your recruiting team to make sure you have clear assessment tools and a process to determine if someone really is a good candidate or not. It'll save everyone a lot of time in the process. And then going back to the culture thing, you have to be really good at trying to find out if someone's a good fit with your culture at your company and give them a lot of opportunities to experience the culture and that dynamic and make that kind of part of the assessment process to see how they respond to that. I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, as we're applying for positions, would you have any tips?
Yeah, lots of tips on that. So most companies use an applicant tracking system online, right? And so when you submit your resume, it's all done electronically now for the most part. And let's be honest, most recruiters don't take time to read every single resume that comes in. So if you're not using, think about yourself from a search optimization perspective, use keywords on your resume that match up to the job description you're applying for. If there's not a match, the recruiter won't pull up your resume, even if you're the most qualified position. So you should have multiple versions of your resume that you submit online for different positions that match those keywords because they'll look for those keywords. So in your position description of each job you've had, modify it to fit the position you're applying for so there's a match. The hardest thing from a recruiting perspective is when you have a candidate you don't know what to do with. Again, they're not going to take time when they have to hire a lot of people to try to figure out where you belong if you don't tell them where you belong and why it's a good fit, and make your case for that in your summary on your LinkedIn profile or on your resume. The other part of that, I get a lot of people who say, Jeff, can you get me a job in Instructure? I'm like, great, I'd love to help you out. What job are you applying for? I don't know, just tell me which one I should be good for. How am I supposed to know? We have 100 open positions, right? So what I find is apply for the job and then use your contacts internally. So send them an email with your resume and say, I applied for this job. I don't know who the recruiter is or who the hiring manager is, but can you link me up with them? That's the fastest way in instead of just sending them a resume saying, connect me with someone that's hiring. And I get that so often, it's amazing, and I don't know how to help those people. But I can help them if they're very clear with me about what they're looking for, not just within my company, but within contacts I have in the network outside of the company too. So be very specific and very clear, and match up your resume and your summary profile to match what people are looking for.
Can you talk about problems that you're working through, maybe things that keep you up at night?
Yeah, how do I hire another 350 people in this market right now, especially engineering? So we have a real talent shortage of engineers and people with software development skills, and we have to hire a lot of them to keep growing our business. And it's actually slowing our business down when we can't hire enough people. So I'm on a task force here in the state of Utah around how do we grow our technology talent pipeline? How do we get more people through the university system here in Utah who have those skills? How do we build that pipeline of candidates coming in from high school? And it's not just a challenge here in Utah, it's especially bad in the Bay Area, but it's across the country. And so our challenge is how do we build that pipeline from high school on to get more candidates in that program? More females for sure, and more people who are interested in STEM type of classes and institutional learning in that regard. So it's a challenge, and it's a real challenge for us and every other software company I talk to. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Now, what does that timeline look like? Do you see a point where it's going to catch up and you expect to have enough engineers in place?
Just as an example, I don't know the right numbers off the top of my head, but I think there were 5,000 roughly software engineering positions posted in Utah last year, and people only hired a fraction of those 2,000-ish. These numbers may be off, but to give you an idea. So they're hiring them elsewhere. And so how long before that catches up? I don't know. We're not getting enough throughput in the educational institutions to meet that demand in the near future. So the only way that's going to change is if we have a big drop in demand due to funding or other reasons in the software sector or something else. But I don't see it changing in the immediate future.
How have you dealt with that where if we're short here in the Salt Lake market?
Yeah, so it drives a bunch of different things. One is you have to look at, if you can't hire those people with skills here, where do you build other offices? So we build out international locations, we build out a Chicago office, and we also allow people to work from home remotely anywhere we can find them. We'll hire the best talent possible wherever we can get it. And if that's somewhere outside of Utah, we do. And then, we also hire people who go through coding schools or non-traditional educational institutions as well. We do a lot of hackathons and other ways to find people who have those skills. And then we also have to outsource more. We don't want to, but we have to outsource to agencies that provide those skills when we can't find them enough ourselves.
So you have a lot of tasks and roles and duties that you're dealing with every day. What would you say are the most rewarding things that you spend your time on?
It really goes back to what Zonda said earlier about creating that employee experience. Our engagement level at Instructures is incredibly high. Our Glassdoor rating is one of the best in the country. Our engagement score is, in the top 10% of companies that do the engagement surveys we do. And for me, that's rewarding because we create an environment and a culture and a situation where people feel like they're part of something bigger and they're making a difference. And it's not just about compensation, even though that's important, it's about other things they can contribute to. And so whatever you do, whatever group of employees you manage, if you create that mindset that it's bigger than what their job is and how that job contributes, I think you get more leverage out of that. And it makes a lot more sense for both the person and the company. And that's something that I like being part of because it makes a difference.
Absolutely. Well, and it makes a difference to me too. I appreciate your efforts there.
It's not just free food, right?
Right.
That's always good.
That is good. Free food's good.
So you have to have some of those things, but it's not all about just that.
We had a conversation about free food and some of the perks, and you were talking about entitlement. Can you speak to that?
So one of the challenges in this market is obviously, for example, engineers who can get multiple job offers to multiple companies at any point in time, making more than they're making today. And that's almost across the board, especially with mobile engineers and some other engineers. So how do you create an environment where you meet the needs and those demands without creating an entitlement mentality? And that's very difficult. And so we were joking around the other day. We provide free lunch once a week, not every day. And we provide free snacks every day, all the time when people want them. But we moved away from moving toward everyday lunch because we didn't want to create an entitlement mentality where everyone gets something every day. And it's just kind of finding that balance. I don't say that we ever find the right balance of providing something from a competitive benefit point of view without creating an entitlement mentality. We also pay 100% of medical and dental insurance as a company. That doesn't help from a consumer-driven healthcare perspective, but it's part of who we are, and our CEO cares about giving people something back for the effort they put into the company, and that matters. And so that's kind of a dynamic you have to balance all the time around entitlement.
So a lot of people may think, I want to build that type of culture, and they maybe think of the technology sector and the free food and things like that, and they may not have the budget or resources to do that. How could you build the engagement and the culture you want and separate that maybe from some of the perks that may exist elsewhere?
Just like any problem in a business, you have to solve it with more of a collaborative mentality. We formed what we call the Panda Council, which is a group, Panda's our mascot. So we formed a group of employees who represent different functions. And we throw out problems to them and say, here's our problem, here's our restraints or cost or budget or whatever else for this. What are some ideas you would have about addressing this? And we solve things together. It doesn't always work very effectively sometimes, but at least people feel like they have input and they have feedback on things. And then decisions aren't forced down from the top all the time, even though sometimes you have to do that. And I find that you can come up with ways to leverage either less resources or not enough budget to cover things in a very meaningful way. Like, for example, we're not profitable yet as a company, but we wanted to have a charitable giving program. So we found a way to do it with the help of our Panda Council, where we do volunteer projects with employees' time, and then we did something called Purpose Portfolio, which is an online tool employees can sign up for, where they see an assortment of different causes they can donate to with every paycheck. In a very fun and innovative way, it talks a lot about where your contribution dollars go when you choose those. You can choose anywhere from $2 to $5 to $10 or whatever per paycheck to various causes that fit with our mission and our company. So it didn't really cost the company a lot to implement this program, but people feel very engaged in it because they're giving back in some way.
Yeah, great, thank you. Maybe we can take an opportunity to open the questions up to the audience, and want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask any questions they may want to ask Jeff.
Hey, I'm Trevor Peterson. I'm the director of the MBA and the MBA program here. And I have a question on transparency, and you talked about it. And you talked about sharing financial information, things like that. We're transparency with our students while not trying to. I guess my question is, how do you do that? Do you just do that with meetings, or are you sending emails, or because our worry is we'll inundate them with.
Yes.
And they're already inundated with school. So how do you go about transparency?
So I think it has to be, just like culture, part of who you are as a company. It can't just be through one medium. So for example, company meetings, yes, we share a lot of information there. Occasionally we'll send out emails with updates. We create videos. So one of our best ways of communicating what the culture is like and how we do as a company, we create videos. Our internal marketing team creates videos. Some are pretty cheesy, like our talent show video, which is horrible. And others are good, that communicate what it's like to work there at the company and some of the updates on how the company is doing. And then we have other forms like our intranet site and whatever other medium we can use through department meetings or team meetings. We have what we call pandemonium, where different teams come and present what's going on in the business, what's going on with them, and people can learn from them. So it has to be part of many different ways. It can't just be one avenue of communication. I don't know if that was helpful, but we've had to find a lot of different ways to do it.
I've been on some school district boards in Eldon School District and talking to students and the school teachers and communities and asking, why don't we teach more STEM class? Why aren't we teaching the program? All the dads, moms work in this field. Why aren't we teaching this to our students? And the answer is finding teachers with this skill when they can go out and make 8 times as much in the workplace. So have you ever considered, as part of your volunteerism, to maybe have camps or classes taught?
I think it's a great idea. Some of our engineers do go guest lecture. I guess guest lecture is not the right word for high school, but help co-teach some classes around technology and STEM-related classes. That's a legitimate concern. I spoke to a group of high school counselors last summer, and that's one of the issues they raised as well, that it's just challenging to find people to teach these courses.
Because as parents, we're spending thousands of dollars to put our kids in some sport that might not help them in their life, or an art, but there's no, it's not accessible to kids.
The other thing I found is education for both counselors and the teachers and the parents. A starting salary for a software engineer coming out of University of Utah right now in this area is between $70,000 and $75,000 a year. I like to get that stat out there so they go, oh wow, that's a lot better than maybe $30,000 or $40,000 doing something else. And so that's just good information to try to get out there to help encourage people to think about that.
I'm Ken, and by the way, I work for Oracle.
Okay, sorry. Shoot me now. Yeah, sorry.
As well, so I understand. I've only been there 3 years, so I understand.
I could have used any company. I just accidentally picked on Oracle. Sorry.
That's okay. Couple of questions. One, you had mentioned having a well-defined expectation for the job. Having clearly defined skills, expectations, clearly defined objectives. How do you manage that after the day one? Because I see a lot of companies who put that expectation out, and then as soon as the onboarding's done, they're put to work doing something completely different than had anything to do with the expectations. And that's one thing. And then the other question I had was related to, you said it's hard to find staff with skill set. And I assume you're saying based on a price point. Because, there's it's either a lack of interesting work that drives engineers like myself and others in the class to seek other opportunities, or it's the fact that compensation isn't growing. I mean, you said 75,000 is the starting, that's been the starting rate for 10 years, ever since the dot-com crash.
Not here in Utah.
Well, you're not in Utah.
Yeah.
But, because of the internet, we can, like you said, we can work anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that kind of changes the dynamic. I just wanted your thoughts.
So I think I'll address the first question first. So for us, we encourage each of our managers through our manager training to set a 30-day plan for every new hire. So what are the expectations over the first 30 days? And yes, those evolve. And the problem with the old school performance review process is expectations would evolve dramatically during a year, and you would assess those or talk about those at the end of the year. And so now we want to be real time, right? So you do have to be agile, and things do change in a company. And as managers, you have to keep those expectations current, which is why we use tools like BetterWorks to keep those expectations updated. Because if you don't do something with a tool or a process to at least keep track of that, it's really hard to stay agile and give people expectations that don't change too much. So that's sort of one of the things we do, the 30-day expectations and then ongoing expectations through a tool that's easy to update and keep current. Going back to, I think your second question was the cost of talent. Most technology companies have raised salaries for engineers by dramatic percentages in the last 2 years. In fact, several technology, both Bay Area and here locally, and I compare those two because those, the two markets that are really relevant for us right now. There are companies, big Bay Area companies, that did a 10% mid-year increase for all their engineering teams. So salaries are escalating, and our challenge is no matter what we pay, we can't find enough people that meet our skill set. And the problem is everyone else is willing to pay $20,000 more if you do increase your salaries. And so there's a lot of stealing from each other and poaching that's happening right now, and it's becoming kind of a challenge. So yeah, it's a real issue. But I have seen salaries escalate quite a bit in this market. And in fact, overall software engineering salaries in Utah are dramatically now above the national market level, whereas that wasn't true probably 2 or 3 years ago. So they are going up here.
What's driving that, Jeff?
Well, I think it's a combination of not being able to find talent and Bay Area companies hiring people here and paying them Bay Area wages and allowing them to work from home. It's driving up a lot of the costs for us trying to hire people here. I'm just picking on Bay Area because that's where a lot of the pressure is coming from, but it's also
Absolutely.
Other places. So.
Same case in the dot-com era.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there was negative unemployment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Bryce?
What are you doing to try to increase diversity in your company?
That's
Are there any
great.
specific things you're doing to try to increase diversity?
Yeah, so we actually have a diversity and inclusion committee that we're working on, and our head of communications, Heather Erickson, is on the Women in Tech Council, and she also drives that committee for us. And for me, it goes back to some fundamental things. Education and awareness, so communicating where we're currently at, and transparency around that, and then accountability. So one of the trends I think we're seeing is a lot of the technology companies are now posting their diversity stats publicly. Even if they're not good, they're going to get them out there so that they can be held accountable for those. That can backfire for some of the companies that are doing it. But some of the companies that are doing it and then making that an issue that they focus on is making a difference. And what we're finding is we get more public with our stats. People are now expecting us to be held accountable for those as well. So it's not just the leadership team that has to support it, but now we have candidates coming in, and when we interview with them, they say, tell us about your diversity programs. What are you doing for gender? What are you doing for this? They're actually demanding it as we're hiring them, and they're looking for a culture that supports that. So if you don't have a strong diversity and inclusion program as a company, I don't think you're going to get all the candidates you would otherwise be able to hire. So now it becomes a business imperative, which then causes change. When it becomes a business need, people change. I think that's what's going to happen.
Hi, Jeff. I'm Jeff Worth. I'm a recruiting manager for High Tech. So it's
We share the pain, yes.
Yeah. I really hear what you're saying. I'm interested in. I'm not from around Utah. I'm from Austin, and I also recruit a lot in New York City. There's a lot of immigrants in those markets, and so we do a lot of H-1B. Does your company do a lot of H-1Bs? Is the Utah market compared to say the Bay Area? Is there a lot of interest in bringing in immigrants?
Yes, they're just challenging because there's a limited number of H-1Bs you can get. And so you can want them all you need, but you can't get them because there's only so many allowed each year, which is why, especially in the Bay Area, they're pushing for legislation to expand the number of H-1Bs available. So, for example, at Ancestor, I think we had 40 H-1Bs in process at one point in time. And at Instructure, we're smaller, so there's not as many, but still, we'll try to get as many as we can. Again, looking for any source we can get to get engineering talent. Most of them were for engineers.
So along those lines, I'm not, I work for eBay, as we discussed before. I'm not in engineering, but watching the way things are developing here, it seems like there'll be a lot more companies moving here in the near future as kind of the prison relocation thing happens, and there'll be more demand. So is the expectation that until that market stabilizes for your demand on engineers, that it'll just be a money play? Or is there some appetite for changing your employee value proposition to allow your engineers to work from home, or allow them to work remotely? Because you did mention one of the shifts is having them come into the office and they hate it. What other types of things are you able to do to try to retain those folks as that battle for talent moves on?
Yeah, I think it's everything you just talked about. We already have to create an environment where engineers can work from home and work interesting hours and be more flexible and all those kinds of things. On top of not being able to find enough people here in the state, which is only going to, I think, continue to be a challenge for the near future. And so we've had to move to other markets where we could find them. And I think that will drive, my view is, let's say we have to hire another 50 engineers, probably 25 or more will be outside the state of Utah, at least.
Jeff, can that create complications as you're trying to cater to engineers that are in high demand and short supply, and yet you also have other employees that maybe would like some of those benefits? Or
It absolutely does. And so our view as a company is we treat everyone equally. So every benefit we give a group of engineers, we give to everyone, and that's challenging, right? So, yeah, it increases your costs and increases your, I guess, your productivity and efficiency to some degree.
Yeah.
So I had a question about how you manage you had mentioned an interest in gender diversity more in the space. And this is just thinking back on my own experience. When I was in the 8th grade, last century, there was, that's when I first touched a computer. And we had a lot of young women that came in to see what it was about, and a lot of them didn't stay. They played with a little and just didn't express interest. Same with my degree. There were 2 women in my graduating class that were interested in computer science. So finding people with 25 years experience with that gender diversity is not possible. So how do you manage that? Because I know it's very politically correct right now to say, we're going to have equality, which is total parity, but you can't just manifest those engineers overnight without, causing other problems with your product and your throughput. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you just said is very true. It's hard to find, for example, a female engineer with 25 years of experience. You're just probably not going to find very many because of what you're talking about exactly is what happened. So you have to increase the pipeline. So we go talk to women's groups. We have the Women Technology Council, and we also sponsor Girl Develop It and other programs where coding schools and other ways can accelerate that process to some degree to get more women interested in coding and technology. And we're finding those to be fairly successful both in our Chicago location and here in Utah. When we sponsor those events, we get a big turnout. So we're not going to get people with 20 years of experience, but we will get people going through the process and a bigger pipeline of candidates with diversity than we've had before. It's going to take a while. It's not an easy fix. And the other thing I would add to that is when you have a bunch of engineers who are dudes and you bring in a female candidate and they go in that room and it smells bad or whatever else, you have to make the environment inviting, right? Let's create an environment where not only are we recruiting people with diversity and expectations, we create an environment they want to actually work in. And so we have to attack both sides of it. And we've had a lot of conversations about how to do that as a company and as an industry.
When we talk about diversity, we also need to think about inclusion, right? What is your organization doing about inclusion? Because I guess you don't care just about having different colors. And the purpose is to have different diversity of thought and how that impacts the bottom line on your organization. And so what is your organization doing about the inclusion, keeping all these diverse people that were so hard to hire?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it goes back to education. We use our product called Bridge as an avenue to do some learning for employees about why people will only do something if there's a reason to do it, right? So you need to help them understand that not only is diversity good to do because it's the right thing to do, it also helps your business. And here's why it helps your business. And here's why diversity of thoughts, opinions, experiences, and backgrounds will help your business succeed. And here's data that supports that. And so we provide information to support that. Businesses long-term who have a strong diversity inclusion program or culture succeed more than those who don't. And why is that? And we talk about those things real openly and share that dynamic in the office. Because if you don't value different opinions, you're always going to be the same and you'll never grow and develop and change. So that's part of a culture I think you have to create.
So I have a question in terms of, you guys recently went public, correct?
Yeah.
And so how do you...
Lovely market timing, right? Yeah.
How do you maintain the balance between creating that people experience and addressing your shareholders? Because you have the pressure there, and as you grow and you have to hit milestones, things like that, maintaining that people culture that you've created when you were private could be a challenge. So how do you go about that?
Actually, there's no question that's a big challenge. In fact, most of our employee concerns right now is, oh, are we going to change because we're public now, right? And so we've addressed that head on. So before we went public, we talked a lot about what it means to be public, what the expectations will be, and how we plan to meet those. And we actually decided that we would treat all of our employees as insiders, essentially. And so we've had the lectures, I joke, but if you don't want to go to jail or wear a Martha Stewart bracelet, here's things you can't tell other people outside the company. We're going to keep being really transparent, really honest with you about things and talk about how the company is doing financially, but you can't go tell anyone else that until we announce those earnings. And that's a risk. Most companies don't do that, but we treat everyone as owners, and that's part of who we are. We give everyone equity, and we expect them to honor that commitment. And that's going well so far, but believe me, it's a concern and a challenge. All it's going to take is one tweet, and someone could go to jail or something. So we're careful about it, but that's helping us meet those expectations, I think, a little more openly. And then going back to what you said about meeting quarterly earnings call, yeah, we've only had one call so far, and it's gone well despite this crazy market. But how do you make sure that you keep a long-term focus? And I think we've really tried hard to proactively talk about that as a team, and not to change the way we run the business. And I think it will be an ongoing challenge, as it is for any publicly traded company, especially in this dynamic, where cloud-based companies got hammered in the last month or so.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sorry.
We're out of time.